So I've been talking together with Tom for quite a while and having the session talking about navigating wonder, using wonder in your senses. Um, just wanted to have an open kind of dialogue about how wonder can be seen as something that's a side effect or something that we don't always focus on as elemental and coming first. For me, it's the first and foremost when I think about designing an experience, and I do a lot with VR design, learning design, and designing for leadership. I think a lot about how we can put our presence and our state of mind into an open sense of wonder. So I know that you're someone who uses wonder as a fuel mechanism in all kinds of ways. Uh, just wanted to animate some thoughts about wonder and maybe some of our individual backgrounds that kind of brought us together in this conversation. That would be great. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, Caitlin is not only uh, a wonder in herself; she is wonderful, and so she brings a fullness of wonder to me because I love looking through her eyes, and she brings an element to us that I believe transcends the models we build in our own head. You know, as humans are, William James said many years ago that part of what we perceive comes from the objects or the environment before us through our senses, but the other part always comes out of our own head. So we build these models, and oftentimes we spend most of the time dealing with the models that are in our head rather than really what are the objects before us and the wonder of those. And I think as we'll go through our discussion, that that's one of the marvelous things that virtual reality can do for us is actually take us to places where we get out of these models that we have stored from our previous experiences and are able to have an environment where we can have a sense of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll sort of
Mm-hmm.
be defining that a little bit later, right, Caitlin, what we mean by that?
Yeah, in the limited time that we have, I will say that for me, I've always been drawn to cognitive science. Jeremy Bailenson was talking this morning,
Uh-huh.
and thinking about how the brain learns and how the brain works uh, in its most efficient way, sense of the world. And a lot of my work in the design of experiences, I realized that a lot of our brain is based on both a wish to make sense of the world, so placing it in context, giving it some kind of formula that we operate from, and also making sure that we feel safe. So that safety, I know as teachers, we want to make our learners have a sense of um, invitation, belonging, safety, and our mechanism is hardwired in the brain to say, can I trust this experience? Can I trust this environment? So wonder for me couples a lot with that pre-stage of creating safe conditions to be together in a collective, to honor each other's dignity, to celebrate. How you do that really takes intention and skill. And then the paradox, the dynamic is then your learners and even your own brain, you can practice letting go and and riding the ride of your thoughts, and also maybe being surprised when you start to reframe the models that had been some of your, you talk a lot about expectations or some of your preconceived notions. How often do we find out that we had blind spots when we start to let go of the models that we were rigidly kind of adopting in our brain. So for me, wonder is all about that creativity and curiosity, and also knowing that it takes a certain level of trust to to let go and then ride the waves of where your mind takes you when you've already created that prerequisite that's safety. So we've talked a lot too about models of Maslow. I know people are saying now in education, put Maslow before you get into the Bloom's cognitive domain, because you need to feel safe and invited first. And that's for schools. That's also for organizations and teams at any age level, I would say. Yeah.
And I think from a practical standpoint, there is another aspect of these models that we build. And it's really that we can't process everything coming from our senses. We have this, not only we think about our traditional five senses that are operating all the time, but also there are another, 17 or 16 or 17 different senses that have been mapped. And so we have all this stuff flooding in. It's sort of like a fire hydrant, and we can't drink from the fire hydrant. So what we do is we build these models that help us basically deal with the bandwidth issues, all these sensory inputs that we're getting. And as Caitlin mentioned, that we use that to make sense. And we spend a lot of time then sort of hunkered down interacting with our models because we can handle the bandwidth there. But when things, the sense of wonder to me is when we transcend that model, where we basically look up and behold something we can't explain. It's something that's beyond our comprehension. We've never had that experience before necessarily, and that takes us to a place where there can be an expansion of our comprehension. Once we are able to digest it and ponder it and basically bring it into our model, and then eventually our models grow, our comprehension grows. And eventually, of course, what we'd like to do is be able to fill in all the gaps because we have such a limited perspective. And part of the gaps come from not being able to see through other people's eyes, not understanding that there are other perspectives, other models that people have. And we become more whole when we're able to occasion those other models, be able to look through another person's eyes. So
Yeah.
that's one of the marvels of virtual reality, because it takes us up to places that are beyond our comprehension. We can do things beyond our comprehension, uh, as limited in what we have in the physical space that we're in. And so
Mm.
this is where we get into this notion, Caitlin, we talked about, is that along with wondering is wandering,
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
almost have to wander into these other places in order to experience wonder. And if we don't do that, we're not able to build our models, not able to complete our models and have this wholeness.
So I've been using the hashtag Wander Wonder for a little while now, and keeping journals of wonder and researching what happens when your mind wanders. There's some great research projects happening even at Stanford here in California about following the brain and actually encouraging some levels of wandering, which is interesting to me. It's part of the research that's coming to fruition in a book project I'll talk about. Um, and also, what I think is really fascinating is from my background, I've been associated a lot with the word mindfulness and use mindfulness a lot in the applications and trainings I run. And people sometimes would say to me, "Oh, mindfulness means focusing and not wandering, and really focusing your attention." And there's a debate there. I err on the side of really favoring the wandering and the ability to, yeah, tune your senses, but also let your senses and we talked a little bit. Tom mentioned uh, the words understanding and cognition and really making sense of things. Sometimes those other senses that we were talking about, your body has a certain intuition, or you have a sense of something that you can't articulate yet in words. And that level of trust to be in that experience and then to be able to reflect about it afterwards, these are emotional capacities. These are capacities we can train and build, but it takes, I think, patience and self-compassion to hang in those moments where you want to ride the ride of your thoughts taking you in a direction that you couldn't expect. And that's for me part of the work that I love to do and experience with others. Really kind of training that level of collaboration where I can say, yeah, these are the stories I carry. what are your stories? I'm curious about them. And I'm so curious that I'm not going to attach to something that was my expectation of what will come about. I'm using more of my curiosity to see from your eyes and be present in a way that breaks down separated identities. And that's where I feel like VR has certain capacities that the quote unquote real world doesn't quite manage as well. VR takes us into that space of feeling outside of yourself. And I would just ask, I know it's limited time structure today with audience, but how many of you have had feelings of wonder when you're in VR? Whether you can wave your hands around or, you kind of sense what we're talking about, and everybody here might describe their experience in a different way, but it does attach to that being kind of larger than the eye. I love it. Oh, I see. Thank you. Yeah, I see a lot of hands clapping too. So yeah, you could tell I get so animated about this.
Well, I mean, one of the things that in my manifesto is that the first time we introduce a person into a virtual world is a sacred moment. It is
Yeah.
because we've all seen it, even in our own cases. But when we put the headset on a person, especially on children, and what they say, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea." And what happens when they take the headset off? Their eyes are really big, and they say, "Wait a minute, why? How am I in this world and the other world at the same time?" And so that is a sense of wonder. That's when we see it a lot. That it takes us outside of ourselves into a whole new way of what we can perceive and how we can interact with that perception. I think mindfulness to me is, as Caitlin mentioned, is where we transcend our models to just pay attention to the wonder that's coming into our senses without having to necessarily diagnose, put it into categories. That's sort of what our ego does to us. We've got to distill this down to these models. But there is another way to transcend. Certainly, as Caitlin mentioned, the mindfulness of what's coming in from our senses. But there's also the mindfulness of following our thoughts, which is sort of where we begin to connect the dots of these models that we maybe have inside of ourselves. But there's another way, and it's sort of, if you sort of put this model in the middle, and on the top you have this mindfulness that raises you above the model so that you see outside the model. And then also underneath that is what we call meditation. Meditation really, where you're trying to shut off the model and get underneath it, under this beautiful, quiet, peaceful place where you basically don't necessarily think. You don't have thoughts. You just experience an essence of this continuum and this connection to the whole universe. And so when we start surrounding this model we have, we can expand the model, following our thoughts, mindfulness, meditation. And so that is what this technology of our age is allowing us to do. I believe it is a miracle. We now have the ability to substantially increase our comprehension and and therefore transcend what we were before, or transform.
This could be the perfect moment to bring up this hovering globe world that we were going to animate
Mhm.
behind us, because that feeling of transcendence, I know that we're talking about things that have philosophical roots. Practically speaking, the what I consider an invitation and also a fascination right now is that we might be feeling a sense of disconnection. I know it's a challenging time with COVID, with everything happening in the world, and VR reminds me that sense of unity and also dropping in on an appreciation of our planet and nature. And when I think about transcending, the other aspect of mindfulness that we talk about, it didn't say in words yet, is that non-judgment. Not judging, but really noticing and looking. And so that's an aspect of wonder too, just saying what if. And they talk about with astronauts, the backstory, if you want to talk with us, both Tom and I, we love aeronautics and outer space, and lots of passion for the history of exploration in the nether regions of space. And astronauts time and time again say that they go into outer space and have this experience called the overview effect, where they know all of the rigor of their training, and they drop in on a sense of awe. Just that feeling overwhelms them of unity and oneness, and also just an appreciation in the moment. You lose yourself, you lose a sense of time, and just start to think about both the magnitude and also the smallness of ourselves in comparison. So I think back to the Transcendentalists and all of the moments of really feeling that profound kind of sensibility. And we can do this. We can do this in VR. You can have experiences where you have an overview effect of viewing the Earth from outer space, and it's another invitation to wonder.
It is indeed. And I was reflecting on this, Caitlin, the other day when I was walking in my neighborhood, and it's here in Seattle. It's there are lots of flowers and trees, and I was walking by this lavender bush, and I've seen lavender bushes many times. Don't think much about it, but I decided to just sort of think about it and just sort of look at the beautiful buds that are there, reach down and actually grab one and sort of push it in my fingers and smell it. And then, so I looked closer, I began to see bees. There were all these and bees swarming around, and realizing, that I'd never really seen that before. And this became an overview effect for me in a way, how incredibly beautiful, and the whole system, the synergy of everything is working together. And this again, to me, took me to a sense of wonder, of things that were physically around me that I never had paid attention before. So this is one of the, well, Caitlin, I don't know if you plan to mention this, but you have these dimensions of wonder that you have been thinking about. And this is certainly one of them. Yes, this is sort of an intentional observation of things.
Definitely. Um, Dimensions of wonder, just through my work, kind of combining a lot of research and also looking into the way that wonder plays out in experiences and in our invitations. Just what Tom mentioned about noticing the lavender and then suddenly falling into what's this? It's a musical moment too for me. I think about it and I can see it in colors, and I'm imagining what you're saying. And I realize there's probably a precondition of you being on that walk and not thinking about something else you have to do or ruminating, because we can actually turn our senses off to an invitation of wonder if we feel a certain way. So that's where I think there is a capacity, and that level of purposeful noticing is one level of wonder. Um, there are different avenues. Another one that I talk about, and I'm talking about in the book that's coming up, is a level of wonder that's more of a, um, let's say, a losing yourself and riding the ride wonder, where and you could have this kind of meditation with yourself about the bees, and then start thinking about something that drops into your brain. But let's say,
With the surfing wonder, is that what you call the
yeah,
surfing wonder?
yeah, it's the surfing wonder, because after a while, I personally think we create narratives for our experiences, where I might say to myself, Caitlin's waking up. She's about to do this. Like we kind of follow along with our thoughts and narrate our days. But with the surfing wonder, you actually stop narrating your experience, and you're so deeply in it and present. And I know that people have felt that in the room, that you just ride the ride and you're actually enjoying it in the present moment without narrating. Like you wouldn't even know to think about taking a selfie in this experience, because you're so into it that you're not thinking about the documentation. Does that make sense? that's the element of wonder that I'm talking about. That's a second level, and then a totally different level of wonder that I think is really interesting is what we'll talk about in the future. That idea of cohesion and how you then the notion of gestalt and having
Yes.
different elements
Mhm.
that come together as you start to form an understanding of how things connect. You can come back from that experience with the bees and say, oh, that actually reminds me of something I was studying that has to do with this. And you create a creative connection because you've experienced that moment as a pure understanding of awareness. And I have examples of people. So I've been referring to this book, Designing Wonder. It has to do with navigating wonder, riding the ride, and then infusing it into leadership experiences, learning experiences, how you would design experiences that purposefully include a sense of presence, belonging, mindfulness within the context of what you're doing. And I think, step by step, you start to see case studies of people who are the most creative brains out there saying that they all have a practice that includes wonder in some way. We just haven't always named it. And now that we have this incredible medium of VR to both animate and amplify wonder, it seems like a great time to really structure, well, how would you invite it? How would you start to practice it and intentionally include it more? So um, I'm just grateful to have these conversations because the more we've created, we've been talking and just connecting. And I think Tom is someone who lives wonder in what you do, and also just the way that your voice right now, it shows it in your words. And so I know that we have different sessions happening today. Always the constraint for me with wonder is the gravity of time and the levity of thoughts. So yeah, I wanted to thank you and ask you too if you had any other thoughts to share, because I'm going to share a few thoughts with the audience too before we close, and then you're welcome to stay a few minutes and talk more with us. This book, by the way, that I mentioned is on my website, caitlinkrause.com, and it's still in its completion stages, but I'm offering people a discount if you want to pre-order it. So you can go to caitlinkrause.com, read about it, talk with me about it, and certainly I can share parts of it as well. I feel like it's a dynamic conversation that turned into a book, so that's the best way. Uh,
It's
yeah,
beautiful.
Tom,
Yeah, I've so
so
enjoyed
much to
this
share.
journey with Caitlin. And one of the things that I would, just the last thing I would say, I know we're out of time already, but one of the things that helps us to see is light. And when we are able to grow in the light we have within us, which means comprehension and understanding, and we gain that, I believe, primarily through experiencing wonder that takes us out of these models we talked. But as we're able to add more comprehension, we increase in light. And when we go about the world, not only in the physical world, but when we interact with others, that light is noticed and it shines into this expansive space, and we're able to see and comprehend more and more. So our light grows brighter and brighter every day. But one of the key pieces of this is being able to see through the perspectives of other people. That's the only way that we can be of one mind, only way that we can understand and walk in the shoes of another person. And when we do that, we can say, wow, I am just one of those blind persons around the elephant. I only have one perspective. And when I'm able to share my perspective and others are able to share their perspective with me, I begin to comprehend what an elephant is. And that's what I think we need to do in our civilization. We need to grow our models so that we see these other perspectives. And the miracle of virtual reality and telecommunications and all of these things are just tools, but they're tools to help us increase in light and have these different perspectives. And that's why I'm so excited about the ultimate objectives of what this technology means in terms of really making us better people and having a better reality for everyone.
Such a beautiful way of putting it, because you spread a light with somebody else and they carry that and that travels. And I feel grateful for even that just short 1 minute right there kind of sums up the reason underneath all of this. And one aspect of wonder that we didn't mention, it has to do with passion and really celebrating sharing your joy. And sometimes consciousness and understanding can take on a sense of cynicism because we understand things and we hold the heaviness of the world maybe on our shoulders. And with the sense of wonder, it does create the levity necessary to really propel meaningful change. And that's also why I've felt it, I believe in it. And with wonder and passion, you can lose yourself in a really guided experience that has all of your values and your vision at the core of it. But somebody else feels that from you, and that energy, maybe that's part of the light. It travels beyond you and creates real strength. So I love that in this session we could just deconstruct the word a little bit to paint a different picture of how wonder can be a force behind all of the experiences we create inside of VR and outside of VR. I I feel grateful to be able to be part of this ongoing dynamic and the conversation. And I'm looking out at the audience and just inviting everybody there to really connect and join and share your stories, because we're all at a really exciting stage in development. So thank you. Thank you to Tom. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Chris and Mike, Chris Madsen, for helping just make this environment so beautiful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and to Steve Bambury and this whole event, CPD and VR. Didn't mention it, but I've been part of it for the past 3 years, and it's just been ongoing. Just a real pleasure to be part of it.
And congratulations on the anniversary.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Feels like a flash, though. It doesn't feel that long.
My friend. Yes. And Chris, thanks.
You bet. You're very welcome.
So yeah. As people are leaving, I will say I had thought of the Japanese. There's a saying that's a translation of the Rolling Stone gathers no moss. Here, there's a lot of moss on the ground, and in Japan, that's it's a sacred thing. It's very valuable when you create a space that has been here long enough to gather some moss. So thank you for coming and creating a grounding with us today.
We want to see through your eyes.
Yeah.
We want to gain your perspectives. It makes us larger.
Yes.
And brings more light and comprehension to us.
Hey, was this space made for just this talk, or have you been using the space for a while?
This space was created in Engage. It's one of the spaces. But then last night, Chris and I, well, over the course of several days, we were thinking about where to hold it, and then brought in certain elements, made this stage where people could sit. We wanted people to be able to see the fish and not feel completely like you were sitting in chairs, but just more comfortable and open. So it had some intention underneath it. And of course, the spirit of Tom was just part of it in the whole creation phase. I was thinking about the story of the bees and lavender and trying to bring in the falling leaves just made it really nice. Yeah.
We were going to be on the moon, right, Caitlin?
We were, and it felt cold, and then people would have been in spacesuits, and then they wouldn't have been able to see their faces. So that was part of it. Just so you know, we might take you to the moon at some point. Expect that in the future. We can still have an overview effect from planet Earth. Yeah.
And look at the bird that just flew by. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a picture. That really is. Wow. Oh, yeah, beautiful.
Said this place was made in Engage. Can we come back here if we wanted to just walk around it, or is this like something you guys typically made?
Yes, this is the Japanese traditional house. It should be in the menu.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, Yeah, feel free to hang out here if
wonderful.
you've been busy in sessions. Feel free to roll your shoulders back and just have a relaxing moment here.
Mhm.
Can be a busy day of whenever there's a long event. I pick places like this in VR to tune into my senses, and Chris and I have been running several experiences with mindfulness, and I see Roxanne out there, Antoinette, a bunch of them, and yeah, spaces like this, just when it feels right to be in them.
Hmm.